All right, Shalom. First and foremost, want to give all praises to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Makakudash. Double honors and double honors to the elders and apostles of Great Millstone that told me this truth. And Shalom to the hopeful elect, the tabernacle of David that's being rebuilt in these latter days. And also Shalom to the remnant, the body of believers, the men, women, and children that are also returning to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai in these latter days. All right, Shalom. And briefly just wanted to go into this article. As we know, today is ThanksKilling. All right, ThanksKilling. All right, a day that is basically celebrating the rob, rape, murder, pillaging, and destruction of our Israelite brethren. All right, our brothers and sisters, of the whole nation as a whole, but specifically, of our northern tribe brethren, Gad, Reuben, Simeon, right, the so-called Native American Indians, all right, who were Israelites. Second Ezra, the 13th chapter goes into that. I'm not going to get it, but Second Ezra, the 13th chapter goes into that. We have prophecies taking place, left and right. We have things happening on the planet Earth. We have the Lord, setting up the board, if you will, getting everything ready for his return. And we're really just waiting on a few more prophecies, all right, to manifest, all right? But the Lord, is coming very soon, man. And we're real late in the game, to be participating and condoning such blatant acts of disrespect, and blatant acts of, folly, in Babylon, this Babylonian holiday spirit, which is rooted in wickedness and rooted in idolatry. We have to spiritually depart. We have to spiritually sanctify, separate ourselves, from these things and make it clear to Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai, that we are in mourning, in grief, and we got to cry out. Crying out is a very important part of, the story, is a very important part of this process of being delivered, So let me go to Ezekiel 9 real quick. I'll start at verse 3. It says, "And the glory of the God of Israel was gone up from the cherub whereupon he was to the threshold of the house. And he called to the man clothed with linen, which had the writer's inkhorn by his side. And the Lord said unto him, Go through the midst of the city, through the midst of Jerusalem," right, which is a city, which is a people before it's a place. All right, which is a people before it's a place. "And set a mark upon the foreheads of the men that sigh and cry for all the abominations that be done in the midst thereof." All right, so today is a prime example, of sighing and crying, for the abominations and the atrocities that have happened, to our people in this land and all over the planet Earth as well. All right, so without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and read this article. It's pretty short. It's on NPR. It says, "Native American tribes are gathering in Plymouth to mourn on Thanksgiving." Right? To mourn on ThanksKilling. Really. It says, "Supporters of Native Americans pause following a prayer during the 38th National Day of Mourning at Coles Hill in Plymouth, Mass. On November 22nd, 2007, denouncing centuries of racism and mistreatment of indigenous people. Members of Native American tribes from around New England will gather on ThanksKilling 2021 for a solemn day of mourning observance." And it's incredible to see. It's incredible to see Jake, continuing just to act like none of this history ever happened, to continue to act like everything is all good. All right, and to basically co-sign Esau, to basically co-sign our enemy in the murder of our brothers and sisters. Because that's pretty much what you're doing, all right, when you just go along, all right, with these particular customs and these particular holidays. All right, you're unknowingly or knowingly co-signing this wickedness. All right, and the question you need to ask yourself is, how do you think the Lord, is looking at that? It says, members of Native American tribes from around New England are gathering in the seaside town where the Pilgrims settled, not to give thanks, but to mourn indigenous people worldwide who suffered centuries of racism and mistreatment. All right, and those are the Israelites. All right, those are the Israelites. Thursday's solemn National Day of Mourning observance in downtown Plymouth, Massachusetts will recall the disease and oppression that Edomite settlers brought to North America. We native people have no reason to celebrate the arrival of the Pilgrims, said Kisha James, a member of the Aquinnah, Wampanoag, and Oglala Lakota tribes, and the granddaughter of Wamsuta Frank James, the event's founder. We want to educate people so that they understand the stories we all learned in school about the first Thanksgiving are nothing but lies. All right, nothing but lies. And that's the fruit, of the devil, all right, which just means deceiver, all right, the Edomite. He's the one who's responsible for making up these stories and for propagating these lies for all these years. No, that doesn't fit anybody else. It only fits him. And in these latter days, we're starting to see, these things come to the forefront more and more often. And that's prophecy in itself. All right, so let me see if I can find that real quick. This is Obadiah 1 and 10. I'll start at 9. It says, O thy mighty men, O Teman, shall be dismayed, to the end that every one of the mount of Esau may be cut off by slaughter. For the violence against thy brother Jacob, shame shall cover thee, and thou shalt be cut off forever. Let me read that again. It says, for thy violence against thy brother Jacob, shame shall cover thee. All right, and shame is covering Esau. All right. It says, we want to educate people so that they understand the stories we all learned in school about the first Thanksgiving are nothing but lies. Wampanoag and other indigenous people have certainly not lived happily ever after since the arrival of the pilgrims, James said. Yep. Because we've been living in absolute hell. All right. Since the European settlers got here. All right. Absolute hell. To us, Thanksgiving is a day of mourning because we remember the millions of our ancestors who were murdered by uninvited European colonists such as pilgrims. Today, we and many indigenous people around the country say no thanks, no giving. It's the 52nd year that the United American Indians of New England have organized the event on Thanksgiving Day. The tradition began in 1970. All right. And that number 70, is a significant number. Anyways, indigenous people and their supporters will gather at noon in person on Coles Hill, a windswept mound overlooking Plymouth Rock, a memorial to colonist arrival. They will also live stream the event. Participants will beat drums, offer prayers, condemn what the organizers describe as the unjust system based on racism, settler colonialism, sexism, homophobia, oh Lord, and the profit-driven destruction of the earth before marching through downtown Plymouth's historical district. All right, and here we see Jake, man. Because we get on Esau, but here we have Jake mixing in these other doctrines and these other philosophies into reality, man. Sexism, homophobia have nothing to do, all right, with the plight of the so-called Negro, Latino, and Native American. All right, and a matter of fact, those things are not a part of our culture. They're not a part of our laws. All right, and this is why we're getting our ass kicked the way we're getting it kicked. And ultimately, this is why we need Yahweh Shai, man. This is why we need Yahweh Shai. Because even now, we have these particular things coming out. All right. But still, it's polluted and it's corrupted. All right. That's why the word going out from the men of Great Millstone, all right, is so important. Because it's just the word, man. It's the word, and it's the understanding of the word. That's what's shaking up this kingdom. It says this year they'll also highlight the troubled legacy of federal boarding schools that sought to assimilate indigenous youth into white society in the U.S. as well as Canada, where hundreds of bodies have been discovered on the grounds of former residential schools for indigenous children. All right, and assimilation schools that took place in Canada and in North America are nothing more than, you could call them, you go ahead and just call them, Hellenization schools. All right, it's the same thing. All right, just a different time period. All right, and that's why reading the Apocrypha is so important. Because when you read the Apocrypha in the 1st, 2nd Maccabees, you're going into that Hellenization period where Jake was forced out of the laws, statutes, and commandments and customs of Israel. All right, and the customs of Yahweh Shem Yahushua, and we were forced into that Greek way of life. And it was the same thing, fast forward, thousands of years later in North America. All right, when you had the conquistadors and you had, the pilgrims, when you had these different Edomite European settlers come to North, Central, and South America, it was the same thing all over again. All right, forcing, all right, their culture, forcing their way of life down the throats of Israelites. All right, but ultimately that's all prophecy. It says, Brian Mosquita Whedon, chairman of Mashpee Wampanoag Tribal Council, said on the Boston Public Radio earlier this week that Americans owe his tribe a debt of gratitude for helping the Pilgrims survive their first brutal winter. Right? Because, Jake. Jake was chill. Jake was on chill, man. It was Esau that broke the covenant, like the scriptures say. People need to understand that you need to be thankful each and every day. That was how our ancestors thought and navigated this world. Because we were thankful, we were willing to share, and we had good intentions and a good heart. That wasn't reciprocated over the long term, we didn't add. That's why 400 years later, we're still sitting here fighting for what little bit of land we still have and trying to hold the Commonwealth and the federal government accountable. Because 400 years later, we don't really have much to show for or to be thankful for. So I think it's important for everyone to be thankful for our ancestors who helped the Pilgrims survive and kind of played an intricate role in the birth of this nation. All right, and we know that. We know that without Israelites, this nation would have never been founded. It would have never got to the prominence that it got to. It only got to this level because of Israelites. Same thing with ancient Egypt and a lot of these different ancient cultures. All right, Jake is the center of life, the salt of the earth. So woe to this place. Can't wait for this place to be destroyed. If that's not the spirit that you're in, you're in the wrong place. So with that, I'll say shalom.